go ahead and get started at 6 o'clock. I'd like to welcome everyone to our regular meeting for the month of April. Hope everyone stayed warm the last couple of days.
Tried.
Evidently not. Obviously, Niles and Shane are not currently here. I think there may be on a fire call possibly, so
The gas tank fell out of a corner on
there you go.
literally fell out of the corner. Right,
Okay, stay for
right
it.
on that thing, right in front of the cooperative extension.
Ooh.
That's where it's at.
Okay. Well, that's where they're at. So maybe they'll be back in a few moments. Again, I'd like to welcome everyone. Everybody had an opportunity to look over the agenda.
I make a motion to adopt the agenda. I'll second.
All in favor?
Nah.
Thank you. All right, moving on to public comment. Grace, are you
I'm gonna go
last?
first.
Are you? I didn't know how.
I'm gonna go first.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, thanks. And I'm just gonna have Brian pass that for Councilor Steve. Okay, happy spring. Thanks for these 3 critical minutes. Tonight, I represent residents from this neighborhood. I'm the voice of their concerns for our trees on Main Street and the square in Yancey County. This past Saturday, Ron Chandler's employees topped 2 maple trees while they were blooming. Did you know that topping trees is not legal in Buncombe County? We asked the workers why they were cutting trees at the incorrect time in the season. They responded saying that they've been topping trees 20 years. We also learned that the tree topper and Ron Chandler are not certified tree arborists. On Monday, we visited the North Carolina Cooperative Extension. They suggested Yancey County consult with a certified tree arborist because arborists maintain proper tree care credentials. In addition, Asheville Greenworks indicated that going further, we initiate a tree protection task force for Yancey County. As indicated on the flyer that you're seeing, tree topping is harmful. Briefly, a few reasons include topping is expensive, topping leads to decay, topping stresses trees, topping is aesthetically unappealing to look at, especially in spring. We learned about Isak Pertree, a young resident who owns Lonesome Timber. He's a local certified tree arborist, and his small business provides tree care services to residential and commercial clients in our local area and forestry services to land managers and public agencies. And we met with him prior to this meeting with the mayor. Certified tree arborist prunes trees, according to Isak, to promote health, increase structural integrity, reduce risk, improve aesthetics, provide clearance, increase value, and open sight lines. Basically, a community that embraces nature. We are ready to work with the city and the zoning and landscaping department to organize a citizen-led amendment to further protect our trees. Any questions? No, you can't ask me questions. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Grace.
Gentlemen,
I told you they'd be here.
Good job, bud.
they had all the faith in the world.
All right, moving on, Miss Lucy Dahl to discuss street light.
I have to apologize, although you probably don't care. I just forgot about town council last month. This is like my highlight of my month, and I just forgot. Anyhow, it's good to see all of you. Just to add on to what Grace said about the trees, I would highly suggest, I heard just in the last day or 2 that Ron makes beautiful crafts out of trees. You know, trees that you can do stuff with, like maple, turning bowls and whatever. And so I'm just gonna say, kill a couple birds with one stone. Is next time these trees need attention, is let Ron take them down, make bowls out of them, whatever, and plant something that is not gonna come up and take over the front of the building. I remember about 5 years ago, Wanda Profit wanted to cut down the trees to get a new picture of the town hall, which has not changed since it was built as a courthouse in 1908. Town hall's not gonna change. Just make the trees match the building, and then we're done with all that silliness. But I didn't come to talk about trees, but thank you, Grace, for paying attention. I don't think I brought this up since you were the mayor, and I'm not even sure I did it when Teresa was, but I am a great believer in the integrity of neighborhoods. I get to know my neighbors. I kind of watch what's going on. If I see a stranger doing something, going around the back of my neighbor's house, I will ask them. I am not shy. But the best way to keep a safe neighborhood is to be able to enjoy, if you have one, and I hope you all do, a front porch. I cannot sit on my front porch without the glare from that LED light that got put up, I don't know how many years ago, and I've asked a bunch of times, and I'm gonna ask again, and I'm gonna keep asking to either dim it, lower it, so it's not going in our faces. It's supposed to light up the street, not my front porch, not my front yard, not my front room, not my kitchen. It's supposed to light up the street. It's too bright, it's too high, I don't know. I think I asked Shane once if they made shades for them, and I don't think that they did.
I do not know.
Yeah, I still have one of those Hubble sky caps. I bought 2 of them, $75 a piece, to cover up the one that was up at Terry McCurry's house, which shines on my front porch, and the one between me and Shane that shines on my front porch. And they did install the one up at Terry's, but then they changed to the LEDs. And a Hubble sky cap is useless for an LED. But it's not just the inconvenience of me not being able to enjoy my front porch, which is important to me. I'm a small town person, and the front porch is where we lived. I'm not in a, back, I'm not inside watching TV. I'm just enjoying life in a small town, as I think it should be for anybody who wants it. So anyway, I'm gonna ask you again. And here's some information. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you, guys. I think I'm gonna run out.
Well, we'll pass ours
All right, Mr. Joe,
on. Watch the pipe there, yeah.
What is that?
don't fall, Lucy.
Yeah.
Did that come out of my yard?
Thank you, Liz.
That's scary.
Take a picture of it, Katie.
Joe Ventries to discuss Red Cross.
Hey, good evening, Mayor, town council members and staff. Just a quick update. First, I want to thank everybody that participated in the Battle with Badges. It was amazing. Lots of people, over 50 units collected. We had people down the hallway waiting to get blood. So it was great, good time. And again, thanks Chief Howe for sponsoring that in your facility. It's a great venue. The next blood drive is at Higgins on April 23rd from 1 to 5:30. And that's the only one we have for April. Other than that, there's been a lot of staff changes in the Asheville office for Red Cross. We have been without an executive director for almost a year. And we're getting our new executive director just now, Jerry Goldberg, who is a wonderful, dynamic woman. She's good with PA, so she will be a great addition. We've been kind of rudderless for quite a while. So I'm looking forward for her to coming online. And we also have new disaster program managers, new disaster program specialists, and the leads on that side. So hopefully they will be here next week, and we'll be talking to Mr. Jeff Howell, EM, and just getting to know them. There's been a lot of change over the process. So, but Karen and I are still here, and we're not going anywhere. So we are your face, and anything that you guys need, we're here. We just did 4 smoke detector installations yesterday. So we're still cranking on that, and still would like to get referrals for that. So, that's all I got. Good evening.
Thank you for all you do. All right, we'll move on to item number 3 on the agenda. Everyone had an opportunity to look over the minutes for the regular meeting held on March 7th, closed session on March 7th, special meeting held on March 28th, and the closed session held on March 28th. Everyone had opportunity to look over those.
Motion to adopt, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second.
All in favor? Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to our presentations. CIP AMP rate study, Mr. Mike Dow with McGill Associates. Dale?
Dale, you know, Mr. Shevers. Appreciate y'all having us here tonight, talking about water and sewer. You know, everybody has probably read the CMP AMP update. Russell, I know you have it cover to cover.
Absolutely.
Looking at you.
Thank you, Mike.
So first of all, yeah, like, I'm Mike Dow, with McGill Associates. I'm the practice area leader, and author of the AMP CMP update. I've got Dale with me, who's our financial services analyst, who I think y'all met before when he came to present the results of the system development fee study. So we'll be presenting today. I'll lead off, talk about the technical part of the study, and then Dale will kind of wrap up with the financial part and basically how we're gonna pay for things, because water and sewer requires a financial investment, as we all know. First, some acknowledgements for obviously the town for all their support and letting us and helping us throughout this study. They've been a wealth of knowledge. Heather, Shane, knowledge of the system has been invaluable. Yancey County for funding the study, and the High Country Council of Governments for doing a lot of the GIS work as part of the study. So again, we're talking about the AMP and CIP first, and then we'll move on to the financial model and the rate study. So the AMP and CIP, the last complete update, as far as I know, was done in 2016. We've amended it 3 times since then, if my records are correct. And Heather, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's 2017, 2019, and 2020. And all those were basically in conjunction with funding applications, and they were tied to specific projects, for CDBG funding mostly. And really, essentially, all they did was updated the CIP to move those projects to the top of the list to support those funding applications, and added those specific projects. There's not been a complete overhaul of this document since 2016, so it was time. So one of the first things we did, as you do with the CIP and AMP, is you look at your demand projections, and this is the population projections for both town and Yancey County. This is coming right from the Office of Management and State Budget Office, so it's 1% growth, I believe, is what we're showing there. Then from the population projections, then we in turn take those and turn those into flow and demand projections on the water and sewer system. Don't try and read this. I got a couple better slides that illustrate that much clearer. I always like to talk from graphs because they, to me, are a lot clearer and easier to read. So this is the treatment capacity of the water plant. 1.0 at the top is the capacity of that plant. The line below that is the demand on the system currently, and then projected over the next 10 years. As you can see, it's steady, but we're a little too close to that line for my liking. So what that means is the available capacity to provide water is decreasing over time, as you would expect, as demand grows and you get closer to that capacity. A couple things to note, if you've read the study, which I'm sure you did, that we did look at some growth areas particularly to the west of town. That's not included in these demand projections, mostly because that growth would not occur until after this window is over, because we don't have the infrastructure there to support that. But if you did add that at the end of this, then that line starts to creep up closer to that 1.0 a lot quicker. So the water system there is probably in the, I don't want to say the dire shape, but it is definitely in need of attention. And the other thing I want to point out with this graph, and I'm glad that Shane brought this up to the front of the room, did you carry that up, Heather? The pipe?
Yes, I did, and I
Of
got a
course.
splinter, didn't I?
Yes.
Yeah.
A splinter from a piece of steel?
Yes, I did, had to take it out of my finger. Yeah.
So what the demand represents is the total water that's being produced and sold to the system. What's not shown there is the amount of water that's lost currently, which makes up a significant portion. Last time we checked, it was 42% unaccounted for water. And most of it is because of situations like you see up front here. Old mains, cast iron, leaks, some which you can't see, some which are hard to find, a lot of which you don't know about until they hit the ground. And then you think about it and you dig in and fix them. So what the purpose of this study is to take a more proactive approach at maintaining the infrastructure, so we can target those areas that we know we have aging infrastructure like this, which unfortunately, there's a lot of that in the system. The sewer side, the wastewater capacity looks a little bit better. This picture was not as rosy a couple years ago, but there was an issue that was found with the flow meter at the wastewater plant. So the wastewater capacity, again, to me, you don't worry about capacity at the wastewater plant until you start hitting that 80% rule, is what the state looks at. And over that 10-year period, we're clearly underneath that threshold. So now in the next stage of the AMP CFA update is to basically do the inventory update. And so we looked at both point assets, which is your treatment plants, pump stations, and your linear assets. We categorized them by the type of asset they are, their installation year, the age, the expected useful life, and that gives you your remaining balance. And again, this is just a snippet of the study. There's tables and tables and tables in the full document of all the assets. It'd be too long to go over for this presentation, but this kind of gives you a flavor of what we're doing in the study. We take all this information in terms of age, criticality, redundancy, and condition, and we assign a risk rating to every asset. And the higher the number and the darker the red is the more critical and the more high priority. So in this instance, you can see at the Cane River intake, the electrical equipment is the highest priority in just this particular example, and that's about to be fixed. So we carry that process through on the wastewater side. We got the Pine Swamp Road wastewater plant shown there, and we did the same thing for the South Toe plants, since that'll be part of the town system eventually. This is a snapshot of the linear asset list. This is the water mains. One thing that we do now have, thanks to High Country, is an accurate GIS mapping of the entire water and sewer system, both mains, valves, hydrants, water meters, manholes. It's all on GIS and ready to be built upon. Again, this is distribution and collection. This is sewer lines. Just another example of the data that was collected. This is particular part of the report is where we do have probably 15 to 20 pages of just on and on tables of assets. So you take all the information that we get from working with the town and looking at the asset inventory and the asset assessment. Then we identify the deficiencies and our priority projects. This is just a top 5 list. AMR improvements which are ongoing. They've been on the CIP for many years and continue to be worked on, and that's a critical component to make sure that we're meeting the water that we're selling, that we're producing. The Bowles Creek raw water line and Cane River intake improvements is in design currently. The Main Street, Bennett Street, Glendale Avenue water line improvements is currently in design. And this pipe here is Main Street, right, Shane? Yes. That's the main section all the way down Main Street, which is some of the oldest pipe in the system, 100 years plus, and that's gonna be replaced with with ARPA funding. The water plant improvements, which is bidding, and knock on wood, we'll get bids this time. And then groundwater well development, which again is a project that's partially driven by the county and the growth potential, but also for additional water capacity. On the sewer side, our top 5 list, again, focusing primarily on looking inward towards rehabilitation of the current infrastructure. The Main Street sewer interceptors to the east, the Bakers Creek pump station improvements, which is in design, the Pine Swamp Road wastewater plant improvements, which I believe is in design, and then the Main Street sewer. So the Main Street sewer is the primary collection line that goes from both sides of town, going outward from the square. And both of those sections of sewer line lay in close proximity to a creek, and they're old and have issues and are prone to inflow and infiltration. So what that means is basically you're getting a lot of rainwater to your wastewater plant. You don't want to be treating rainwater. And then the East Yancey sewer system improvements, which is the collection system and the plant, which is also in design. And I think another thing to point out, I'm pretty sure the wastewater plant, the Pine Swamp falls in this category as well, and all the ones that we're involved with are all 100% grant funded through ARPA. So again, here's another slide that you're not intended to read, but just an illustration of the 10-year CIP that's developed. So this is year by year, all the projects are prioritized in that 10-year window with the costs that they're going to incur in that year. And then, so then you can kind of start to see a strategy. You'll see this one looks very heavily front-loaded, and it is because of the fact that we got a lot of grant money for the projects that we just identified. But the way the CIP is laid out, just something I just learned here recently, is that these projects are always talking, we're not obviously gonna spend all the money in year one. It's gonna be spread out over 2 to 3 years, so think of it as more of a long-term plan, and then once we get through this round of construction, then we'll hit the next project and the next project. And, the kind of the goal would be, we look at this every year, we take stock of where we are, we look at that demand projection again, we see how we're doing versus those lines. If they're starting to get closer together a little faster, then we maybe ramp up the discussions about additional supply capacity. But right now, I think the focus is, as it should be, looking internally and strengthening the infrastructure you have, and that's a perfect example of why. So I'm gonna let Dale talk about how we're gonna pay for a lot of this stuff. Thankfully, again, a lot of it's been paid for by the government, but Dale has gonna talk a little bit more in depth about capital improvement plan and what they are and why we need them and how they're developed. And we may have that out for you, or you will wait till later.
I've got the little timing thing here to
Okay.
get some stuff kind of introduced and covered a little bit, and then we'll kind of get into the details. Again, my name is Dale Sheepers. I'm with McGill Associates, been with them for almost 7 years now. I'm a financial analyst, yes, that's what I am. And I do rate studies, system development, fee studies, capacity studies, those sorts of things. And mostly what I do is I help people understand the relationships between expenses and revenues and those sorts of things, so we can make good decisions on how to make sure we have enough revenue in our enterprise fund for our utility, so we can responsibly and sustainably maintain that system. And 40 years ago, I was the guy that dug up a pipe like that because it was leaking, and my job was to dig it up and fix it. So I started about 40 years ago, working out in the field, fixing things, understanding pretty much from the ground up how systems work and how they fit together physically. And then later, I spent about 30 years in local government, public works director, utility manager type, doing the how do you run it, how do you operate it, how do you maintain it, how do you make this thing go, so the next person that takes over has a good, viable, sustainable system to run, and we just pass the baton and keep it moving. Okay, so that's a little bit about me. Okay, so Mike talked about how we build from a technical perspective our capital improvements plan, our CIP, okay? And we, in the financial world, have to take that and say, okay, now, how do we plug that into the cash flow? The dollars that are coming in, the expenses that we already have, the things that we need to do in the future, the debt that we already have to pay, and all those sorts of things. How do we fit that together so in 10 years, we're still in a good position, and then further beyond that? So there's 4 components that we look at in terms of taking a list of pages and pages of asset inventory, assessments and all those sorts of things, and cost to do replacement, and to get them into a CIP so we can start to manage those things and get them from the drawing board into reality. And first one is viability. Does it work? It has to work, has to be reliable. If it's gonna break in the middle of the night, it's gonna cost me a whole lot more to fix that thing than if I do a mass replacement before it breaks. You know, the old break and fix approach is at least 5 times more expensive than the managed approach. Efficiency, that would be upgrades to things like pumps and motors and those sorts of things over time. Newer things are more efficient. That would be a requirement, that would be an element of making that decision to bring things onto the CIP. Regulatory, we all know what that one is. When the rules say that we have to do more things, more treatment, treat new and emerging pollutants and those sorts of things, they mandate we have to reply. And then system growth, where we need to expand in other areas that are, excuse me, are looking for demand and that growth that we want for our community. That's another factor that plays into that. Okay, so just looking around a little bit, we've all lived through COVID, we've all lived through supply chain difficulties and those sorts of things and so forth. And just the last 3-year trend on an annual average basis, okay? Your water and sewer revenue has climbed 3% on that basis. Your expenses have actually gone down a bit, okay? And most notably, I see that that is in capital reinvestment. Okay, so construction cost index is up 11.3% per year for the last 3 years. That's all the supply chain things and other things that, you know, we're having trouble finding bidders. Okay, that sort of stuff. It's much more costly. If we look at the consumer price index over the last 3 years, it averages 5.5, almost 6% per year. Last 12 months is about 3.4%. And your system is growing a bit, about 1.2% per year, but that doesn't keep up with all those other factors that are driving the expenses much faster than just the normal or the projected growth in your system. In other words, you don't have enough new customers to pay the bills that are going to go up in response to those inflationary factors that are listed above. So, what do we do? What I have is the 10-year capital plan, and what this is going to show is what Mike had up on the screen, is pretty much what is on this table, and that is what do we need and when do we need it, okay? And the cost that's associated with those projects when they need to occur. So these costs have been indexed up to the year of construction. So when we adjust our revenue via rate increases, we know that we're collecting enough money to be able to fund these projects when they occur based on that escalation of cost over time associated with the construction cost index. Okay? And what you'll see is across the top is the particular years. We're in fiscal year '24. Okay, so the capital plan is years 25 through 34. So that would be the third column of numbers through the next to the last column. If you add those numbers up, they go into that very first column, which is the 10-year capital improvements cost. Okay? So the first page is on the water system. So if you go down to the bottom of the first column, and we see the 1.8 million, okay, that is the 10-year projection of capital improvements that are needed for the water system. Okay? Notice also in current fiscal year, number's pretty big at 12 million. Okay? And again, thanks to ARPA money and other things, have funded a lot of your needs in the current fiscal year. Okay? So that's very good news. Okay? When we carry on from after that first year, we've got about roughly $2 million worth of improvements on the water system that we've identified that we have to address as we move forward over the next 10 years. Okay, also notice all the way out to the right, okay, we've done a very comprehensive analysis of your assets, and we know that when we get to the end of 10 years, it ain't over. We got a long ways to go after that. There's another $20 million we've identified through this AMP asset inventory program, so we know there's a lot ahead. We've broken that off into manageable sections, in each year rolling up into the 5 years and then the 10 years and then beyond. So we're not just saying there's a big mountain of stuff to do and I hope somebody can figure it out someday. All right, we're being proactive. The town is being proactive by authorizing this type of work, to take this kind of approach, to be looking into the future realistically. A lot of folks kick the can, and somebody else has got to pick it up someday, and that's what we're doing. ensure that the can doesn't just keep getting
There's the can.
And you know, the water mains don't get another 100 years old,
Yeah.
which I don't think they'd probably just be a little pile of rust in that amount of time. Okay? And the other thing that Mike said that I think rings with me as a former operator is that you've got 30% of your finished water. You spend a good amount of money making that water, and 30% of it or more goes into the ground. You have no use for that water that you spent that money for. Okay? So fixing pipes helps with that capacity and demand curve. You can sell more of that water rather than make it and let it go into the ground. We're doing a good thing. Same thing in opposite works with the sewer. All the rainwater that we're treating out of the creek or out of the storm drains and other places that it infiltrates into, those are dollars that we could spend more, I think, effectively if we're not treating rainwater. Okay, so on both sides of the spectrum, as we invest our money into these capital assets, we save on several levels. Operationally, by not treating the things that we shouldn't treat, or letting the things that we do treat soak into the ground without value. And with that capital reinvestment, we can improve viability, we can improve efficiency and those sorts of things with upgrades to the plants and other assets that we have, pump stations and those sorts of things. Okay, flip the page, and that's your wastewater system. It looks a little bit different. It again has a lot of plant type improvements, so a lot of improvements, I should say, including plant improvements, listed in the current fiscal year. Okay, followed by another $8 million over the 10-year period. Okay, most of those, or I think all of those, are line improvements. Again, let's get the rainwater out of the sewer system, so we're treating the things that we're paying to treat as opposed to a whole bunch of water that shouldn't be. We don't need to, if we can just get it out of the pipes. And that's where we're going with that. See those three big projects. Then again, looking out beyond 10 years, another 30-some million that we've identified that need to be addressed as we move forward. Okay. So down at the bottom of the page, interesting numbers. You see about 10 million in what needs to occur in the next 10 years. That is closely following the 30 million that we're investing today. And then as we look beyond year 10, we've got another 53 million waiting for us as we progress to that level. Okay. All right. Don't turn page yet. Okay. The next question becomes, how do we pay for this, right? It's a lot of stuff to do. We have a limited number of customers, and there are, those are questions that everybody has. And we need to be responsible in how we address those questions. State of North Carolina did an infrastructure needs assessment a few years back, and essentially said, if we kind of ballpark the amount of investment that the state, all the municipal utilities, water and sewer utilities in the state need to invest in their infrastructure to fix all these things, okay? How much is that? And then this graphic shows us where the funding sources are. Okay, now this is long before ARPA, this is long before the infrastructure bill and those sorts of things that got you to the $29 million of investment here in your community. Okay, so this was all before that could ever be assessed. But my guess is that the continuation of those kind of dollars is not going to continue. I think most people, I recall, I started back in the day when everybody was looking for the next round of federal dollars that would come along from the Clean Water Act when they first built sewer treatment plants in towns like Burnsville and places where I was back in those days. gee, they put all this money in the seventies to build all these plants because the EPA just made the Clean Water Act that said y'all gotta do it. And we're gonna get you some money to get started. So, you know, in the late 1980s and early 1990s, a lot of folks said, well, we're waiting for more. And that didn't happen. Not from kind of a normal, I think, methodology. Abnormality came along with COVID and other things that caused the influx of dollars that I think are, as these are spent, they're not gonna come back. Okay? So that's kind of where this study begins and ends, saying that of all these needs, I'll how to make the little laser work here, but okay. So, oh, all right. Well, if you look at the big water and sewer drops there, over on the right-hand side, there's a little bar that says 7% grants. And down at the bottom on the blue, the green one, it says 8% grants. Okay, that's how I put this in perspective. That under normal conditions, the grant availability across the state is about 7% or 8% for each utility that's gonna be available. Okay, so in other words, when we fill out our funding applications, the competition is such that, you know, 7% of all the capital needs for water systems across the state are gonna be funded with grant dollars, money you don't have to pay back. Likewise on sewer, 8%. Okay? So, from that perspective, what we have to do is be mindful of being responsible for how we approach this and how we manage it. Okay? From the financial perspective, here is a little summary chart. You can go ahead and turn the page. This is for everyone here in the audience to see the chart that goes along with the financial model output that includes some tabular information that demonstrates or quantifies what makes up each of these bars and each of these lines. Okay, so what we have is current year and then a 10-year projection. The blue part of the column is operating expenses. Okay, pay the salaries, pay the electric bill, buy the chemicals, contracted services, those sorts of things. Trucks, equipment, those sorts of things are operating expenditures. Okay, existing debt service. You have very little debt service. That's the little tiny orange piece of the bar. Okay, projected debt service, which is the debt payments that need to be made in conjunction with future debt issuances to pay for those capital improvements included in the 10-year capital improvements plan, is the green part of the bar. Okay, so as we move forward, you can see that thing grows as you go along, and it grows because we have those large capital investments that we're making in that 10-year period, both water and sewer. Okay, now, the way that the model works is that I use a conservative assumption for those debt issuances. Bank loan, 20 years, market rate. Okay, that would not be, I'm not gonna try to project what debt payments would be associated with doing those projects, funding from a conventional methodology with things like SRF at low interest loan and principal forgiveness and those things. So in other words, if you build the project, sell the debt, pay the payments, this is how it looks. Okay? So this is conservative. So we project the rates to be able to fund at this level using these inputs. Okay? So you don't need to, necessarily, you don't need to continue to defer things, waiting on the grant, waiting on the principal forgiveness, those sorts of things. Now, you can certainly do that. I know a lot of other communities that do that. I'm not gonna do anything unless I get the low interest loan or the principal forgiveness. Okay? So, it's kinda kicking the can a bit. And I know others that do that. Again, it's up to this body to determine how you're going to do that. My model is saying that if we construct these projects in the CIP using the forecasts that I have for operating expenditures and those sort of things coupled in there, so we get what's called a revenue requirements analysis, says that if we take all those expenses that we can identify reasonably in that 10-year forecast, then my revenue requirements analysis says this is how much additional revenue is needed at these times throughout this 10-year interval to pay all the bills. Okay, to make the fund sustainable. So we don't take all the available cash that we have and spend it in the first year, and then we have none. Or, opposite side of that coin could be we defer everything so we can save a bunch of money, but then we never use it. Okay, so this way we can manage it. I put together a model that helps us make those decisions. Okay, so really quick, if you want to, I'm going to buzz through the tabular data here on the handout. First section is revenue. Okay, so the operating revenue at existing rates, that's what you get as you send the bills out, you can pay the bills and so forth, user charges and fees, and you'll see that that grows a little bit over time. Okay, that's the internal growth, that's the growth that I talked about earlier, 1.2%. So with new customers and other additional demands on the system, you're gonna make a little more water, you're gonna sell a little more water, that's the projection moving forward. Okay, the new revenue, those are dollars that are generated by rate adjustments, okay, i.e. revenue adjustments that you're gonna make over time. Okay, so the total revenue available in each fiscal year is at the bottom of that first table running across. Okay, likewise with expenditures, got 4 types of expenses. Regular operating expenses, again, pay the help, pay the bills, do the repairs and maintenance, buy the gas, put it in the car, that kind of thing. And then the cash finance CIP is my way of saying capital outlay. This is your capital reinvestment. That comes in a couple of forms. One would be normal, what I would call normal type capital outlay, buy the new pump, buy the new motor, those sorts of things as they fail, buy the new trucks and equipment and those sorts of things. It also includes the cash investment that you're also going to make in these major projects as you move forward. Okay, the reason I say that is that a lot of questions that I get, one primary question is, but you were going to sell all this debt. I mean, look at that green thing, it gets really big out there. That's too much debt, right? So I asked my question to myself, well, how much is too much? Okay, you can look in a lot of places. What I found were several studies, research done by the American Water Works Association, one of which is benchmarks or performance metrics of efficiently run utilities. Okay, so I would say that we'd like to be an efficiently run utility and take a look and say, what are those benchmarks and how do we stack up? And I got a little slide I'll show you a little bit later how you stack up. But I use those sorts of benchmarks, so it's not just me saying, go ahead and sell this debt, you'll be okay. What I do is I look at those benchmarks and say, are we within some of those bookends or guardrails, if you will, that says, should your sufficiency of cash above debt be more or less than 25%? Okay? So I use those benchmarks to make sure that when I stand before you and others ask questions about what's going on here, that we can answer and say, yes, we are comfortable with this because we fit into these measurements of effectively run utilities according to the industry standard American Water Works Association research that says these are some places, some benchmarks that say you're effectively managed. Okay, so we can join that group, we can stay in that group and say, you know, just let the utility run like a utility. We're managing it as effectively managed utilities manage themselves. Okay. So the next little part of the table is kind of where the rubber meets the road. On the table portion it says overall revenue adjustment. Okay, so revenue is different than rates. Okay, revenue is the amount of money in whole. How many more dollars do we need to make this thing go? Okay, represented as a percentage increase. Okay, so in year one, we would need a 7% revenue increase to make sure this all works. Okay, and the proof of that is that in the next table, we've got the $2.797 million of expenses to cover, and then the difference being a net positive on the revenue is $33,000. Okay, so that's positive. You can see going across the page that we have a lot of positives. A couple of them are red, but they're not too red. They're not too big. They're manageable. Okay? I'll get to it in a minute, and I'll tell you why I believe that those are manageable. Okay? Next one is the effect on the current customer's bill at the existing rates. Okay, so in other words, if we take our revenue requirement, that's how many dollars do we need in addition to what we have to make this thing go, and we say, okay, we're gonna get those dollars from using our current rate structure and adding 7% to everything across the board for everybody. All right, that would generate the same, you know, the amount of revenue needed because it's applied uniformly across the board. Okay? So if that were to occur, average customer bill in Burnsville is about 3,000 gallons. So that 3,000 gallon bill would start at $48.42 today. And next year it would be $51.80. It would be a $3 per month increase. And as it progresses across the table. Okay? So you'll see first year 7%, then followed by another 7, and then 6s across the board as you move across. Okay? Last little item here before, well, 2 more things, and then I'm sure you have a few questions. Financial indicator section is, I've got a number of financial indicators, one of which is the working capital, which is basically your cash. Okay, you know, what's the balance in your checkbook today? It's about $1.2 million. What happens over the 10-year period? 1.2 turns into 1.7. But if you look right below that, one of the benchmarks is the working capital as a percentage of total expenses. Okay? So what that says, the amount of working capital above expense, relative to expenses, says that if you got $0 of revenue coming in, okay, you could pay all the bills and continue to pay all the bills for 45% of the year. Okay, I can translate that into days, but my brain isn't quite that sharp to do that just off the top of my head. But you got about half a year's worth of cash if nobody paid a bill and you paid all of your bills just as you normally would, produced all the water, sold all the water, fixed all the pipes, paid all the bills and everything for about a half a year. Okay? In the benchmark world, the low side of that's about 30%. The high side of that, I've seen it as high as 300%. But if I had 3 years worth of cash laying around, I would probably have people wondering why the rates are where they are if you just have 3 years worth of cash and you're not fixing enough. Okay, so you can kind of get an idea of how some of those extremes are. Okay, if you're below 30%, if you're getting down to, you know, like less than a quarter of the year of cash in hand, yeah, I think I'd worry too. And what that's for, I mean, your fund balance, your cash on hand, is to address those things that are unexpected. Okay? And the better we are at measuring our utility, the assets, the values, the work that needs to be done, when it needs to be done, the criticality, the consequence of failure, all those sorts of things, the better we are at that, the less likely we'll have, you know, large emergencies that we'll have to address, which means that our cash on hand is a lot safer when we're better at managing all the day-to-day things that have a tendency to fail. And when they fail, they cost a lot of money. Okay? Last little thing that I'll point out is I like this thing. It's a good talking piece as you explain to your staff and citizens and others, because you can kind of see the numbers, you can see the trend. And at the end of the day, you know, I'm the 3,000 gallon customer on a fixed income with, you know, difficulties and so forth, and I say, well, you know, my bill's gonna go up to $52. And, you know, a response, there's $10 million of capital improvements that we need to address in the next 10 years. What am I paying for? That's what I'm paying for, right? I'm paying for someone to run my utility effectively, whether it's the day-to-day operations, can I pay the bills, can I pay the help, can I keep the lights on, can I keep the water in the pipes to the best of my ability, okay? The biggest decisions that we make in utilities that affect the rates the most and the customers is how you manage your capital investment. It's the most control that you have on it, and it has the biggest benefit, or it can have the biggest problem, depending on how we manage it, okay? So, Mike and I are people that have been around this business for a long time. We are an extension of your staff to help you make good decisions, okay? So, pause for a moment. Anybody's got a question?
I have one question,
Okay.
Dale. So, do you, as you were doing this, and I know, no one here knows the future, obviously, but as you were doing this, we've obviously saw the trend in construction cost, recently, and supply, demand. Did you take the current construction cost and apply that into this?
Mhm.
As where it is currently? I mean,
Right.
we obviously hope that, I know, you know, as a contractor, I know that, you know, when that amount of work comes down,
Right.
then prices are gonna be accordingly. I mean, when people don't have to be aggressively bidding on projects, then it's gonna show. And I was just wondering if you had taken that into consideration at all in your numbers when it
Yeah.
comes to expenses.
Yes, absolutely. The current day cost construct is Mike's part with his engineers. Work with it every day.
Right.
They pre-bid meetings, bid openings, day after day, week after week, month after month. We know the contractors, we work to a lot of contractors closely so we can be accurate. One thing that I didn't like in all my years was, you know, you go out to bid, and when the engineer's the low bidder, you know, they miss it by enough that, you know, the engineer's estimate is too low. That's not a good place to be. Because, you know, we put our model together, and we put our cash together, and we, you know, structure or approach our debt issuance requirements for a project based on the engineer's estimate. And if it's this much higher than what the engineer said, we're planning down here and the number's up here, then you gotta reel back a long ways to try to cast out again to get something that makes sense.
And in the last several years, I mean, most bids have been very close to the engineer's estimate.
Mhm.
But probably in the last year, they've exceeded that by a large amount, and
Yeah.
we all know why.
Yes.
And my question was just, did you take that into consideration in the future, you know, with these numbers, thinking that those costs are gonna come down some?
Well, what, I'll clarify just a little bit that what I do is I forecast forward. So Mike and his group says, here's what we got going today, and then moving forward, I think in your table, the construction cost index is at about 3.5% year over year. Okay, before COVID, that number was 2.5, and we kind of got the spike, and we're kind of coming down off of that. So, you know, if we project from way up here, that's not really a great place to be.
Right.
You know, then you're setting rates for numbers that are way too high, and if you go too low, then you're kind of in the same spot. So we got to be a little more conservative in how we set that trajectory. It's going to go over 10 years.
Okay,
So that's about how I approach it.
okay, thank you.
And Russell, that's another reason why we would recommend like revisit this periodically, just so we can keep track of that. So
Right.
as these things start to come back to pre-COVID days, I mean, it's never gonna get back that low, but we wanna make sure that we're using the most accurate numbers, most recent numbers for
Sure.
everything.
And I know this has been mind-boggling to you as well as an
Absolutely.
engineer, because, I mean, you've done this for so many years, and you've been spot on with your estimates, and then all of a sudden,
It's just
you're not.
numbers.
You've got two contractors bidding a project where normally you'd have 12
Yeah.
submit a bid, so numbers reflect that.
It's hard.
And that's a great point, that if we make a 10-year plan and don't see how we did for 9 years, well, shame on us. There's a lot of things that happen just in 1 year, or even a couple of years. So my recommendation would be to revisit every year, especially with the volatility in the construction market today, that says, you know, where is this thing gonna settle out? It looks like it's settling out a bit, but at this time next year, we might be saying something completely different. All depends. Got an election coming up too, and that has a big thing, you know, a big impact on how people view the economics and how they bid and those sorts of things too.
Thank you. I've got one other question, and we'll move on and let Judy start. On the difference in shortage, you know, when you get to fiscal year 2030, with that major decrease, is there something in here that's supporting a major project? I mean, is that why that there's, because your operating expenses kind of hold the same all the way across? I was just wondering why that major decrease happened.
Yeah, it's the result of when those capital projects fall on the calendar, if you will.
Right.
And, you know, another thing to keep in mind too is that when you get out beyond 5 years, it gets pretty fuzzy.
Sure.
So I wouldn't take this to the bank necessarily, when you get out that far to that extent, if you will. In other words, if we're breaking even, if we're pretty close to breaking even out there, that's where I want to get to. Now, I could, you know, bump the 6 up to a 7 and those numbers turn black.
Right.
Okay, but the other thing to remember is if the number is black, you'll see that the capital, the available capital, working capital goes up. So if we get net positive income, net positive revenue, if you will. If it's positive, it goes into the fund balance, right?
Right.
If it's negative, a little comes out. Okay, so, you know, we put in 30,000, 130,000, 60, and so forth through the first 5 years, and then we take a little bit of that back out in the next 5 years.
Right.
And, you know, that's mostly a function of, you know, how close are we to this thing balancing out, right? If you had big swings in it, then,
Yeah.
you know, we're probably not predicting things well enough or planning for them well enough if you have large swings one way or another.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Russell asked my questions, so I'm good.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think the big takeaway from that, from my point of view, is if we have our older population, fixed income, and you talk about a 10-year swing from $3.50 to $5, so over 10 years, you $1.50 increase, that's not bad. And last time it was raised, that was one of the key things everybody's talking about was the increase, but there's not a thing alive that's not went up $1.50.
Okay. All right. So, what we did from this point, we know the kind of revenue that we need over time. Now comes the big question, how is it that we're gonna collect this money? Who's gonna pay for it? Okay, so first slide is, you have two components to your rate structure. You have a minimum charge and you have a volume charge. Okay, minimum charge includes 3,000 gallons of water, and then beyond that, from 4,000 on, it's a charge per 1,000 gallons. Okay, so if we do an across-the-board increase, this is what happens. We get 7% increase on each of those customer classes. The total revenue gained on the fixed cost side of the equation is about $70,000, and about 110 on the variable cost of the volume costs. Okay, your total net increase on the rates themselves is that $180,000. That's the additional revenue you need to make things work. Okay, so reviewed that with staff, and again, we understood from our discussions that, you know, we'd really like to see something that pays attention to the lower volume user. You know, somebody 1,500 gallons, you know, less than 3,000. Okay, so we can raise revenue without raising rates by applying the volume charge to gallons under 3,000 gallons. Okay, so talked about that for a little while, and when we consider how we're going to collect the dollars from the different customer classes, there's always a little tension between two ends. Okay, real simple. One thing we could do is we could say, hey, we need this much revenue to operate our system. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to divide it by all the customers, and everybody pays a flat rate, and they all pay the same. Get the same amount of money every month, right? Nice, easy, predictable, that sort of thing. But what happens when we get higher demand, more volume use? Well, you either don't have enough money, or you have to set your flat fee high enough to where you can accommodate those peaks and valleys in your demand. Okay, so on one hand, it's really easy, right? But on the other hand, it's not really the fairest thing in the world, especially if I'm a giant user, right? I use a whole bunch of water and you don't use hardly any, but we're paying the same amount because it's all flat rate. Okay, so that's just a really quick and dirty kind of an illustration that says there's always a little tension between how you're going to address a revenue increase, a rate increase. Okay, so we started out with this scenario to say, this is how it works today, this is what we're used to here, this is how we've been doing things for a long time, this is what residents are used to, this is the rates that they pay, and a 7% increase across the board then tells everybody, you're all the same, you're getting treated the same, you have the same increase, relatively speaking, and we'll get the revenue we need and move on. Okay? So, if if we back up a little bit to the, well, what happens if we charge a volume charge for something less than 3,000 gallons? Okay, what happens is that those people that have that bill that's 3,000 gallons, they get the majority of the increase, right? Because they weren't paying for a 1,000-gallon unit in what they have in their minimum bill, minimum charge, and now they have a volume charge for those 1,000 gallons on both water and sewer. Okay, so what happens is it looks like this. Okay, if we reduce the minimum charge volume from 3,000 to 2,000, the inside residential customer has a 9% increase as opposed to a 7% increase. Okay, outside residential customers 11, commercial and industrial is very little, right? Because the amount of volume in those types of customer makes up a lot smaller portion of the revenue, right? So that's what you would expect to see. A little model that does all the calculations and says, okay, this approach says we collect $124,000 on those minimum charges because we're gonna charge for another 1,000 gallons in the mix. Okay, the people that are most affected by that happen to be those folks that are in that average bill, 3,000 gallon bill. Now, if you have a 2,000 gallon bill, it doesn't change at all, right? Because we didn't raise your rate. So that's the tension, right? I've got a certain portion of the customer class that we're making accommodation for, if you will. We're making adjustments to fit them as we see that. And as a result, you know, the next group above has a more substantial increase. Okay? So the other thing that we did is we looked at the size of the meter. Okay? So if you have a bigger connection and bigger meter, you have a larger demand on your system, right? You're going to be able to use, you are going to use more water. That's why you have a bigger meter. Okay? So the cost, not only of the meter and the pipe and everything that connects it to your particular use, over and above that is all of the plant capacity that gets the water into those larger pipes to satisfy your demand. Okay, so bigger meters should pay more money. Well, the AWWA has a meter equivalency ratio that they use as a multiplier that says if you, for instance, if you have a meter that is like a 3/4 inch meter, standard meter, then there's a multiplier that goes with every incremental increase in meter size. Okay, took a look at those numbers, and by the time you got to a 6-inch meter that says you should pay on your fixed cost 33 times what the 3/4 inch meter is, that seemed a little excessive. Done this exercise with other utilities, and we applied some more realistic and sensible numbers to that approach and came up with some meter charges that make a little more sense, that would generate about $56,000 of your $180,000 revenue increase requirement. Okay, and in that scenario, volume rates didn't change at all. Okay, so again, we see a little tension here that says, okay, wait a second, residential customers pay the majority of the increase, and commercial and industrial don't pay hardly anything. That's a function of how much volume is in the bill versus, you know, how big the connection is and how much you use over time. Okay, so this is another illustration of some of the positives and some of the negatives. Now, is this hard to fix? Absolutely not. You can adjust the volume charge for the commercial and industrials to get those folks into the same level of additional revenue as others. Okay. The other thing, keep in mind as well, is that the revenue requirements analysis is a just-in-time approach that says we're going to raise the rates just in time to cover the expenses as we forecast them. all right? You can do stepped increases, that you can increase beyond what that just-in-time amount is, and then not have to raise rates every year to get you there. It's another approach. And one utility that put all this stuff together, and they said, okay, this really looks nice, but, you know, what would the rate increase be if we increase the rates to cover all the capital expenses and all the forecast expenses for the next 10 years in one rate increase? I said, hold on a second. Did I hear that right? You want to do one rate increase for 25 years, or one rate increase for 10 years? Yeah. That's what we're gonna do, because we're gonna fund all this stuff, we're gonna make the decision today, and we're gonna do it. That's what they did, they had a 35% rate increase. In 1 year.
They had some happy customers.
Yeah, and maybe some folks that didn't get reelected either.
I promise you that.
That's what, that was their decision. I put the stuff together. The normal approach is just in time. And again, there's a little tension there, right? Your customers are gonna say, why are you making a rate increase that's bigger than what you need? Which, you know, my 10 years worth of rate increase, yeah, I'm sure a lot of folks asked that question. I wasn't there, so I'm not sure what other parts of the conversation occurred after that question. But that is another way to approach it, is if the rate increases, the rate adjustments that you make generate more than what the just-in-time revenue requirement is, there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just how you choose to interact with your customers, how you choose to generate that revenue that you need to run your utility and do it in a sustainable fashion. Okay? So those are the couple of scenarios we came up with to get kind of some bookends on this thing, to say, okay, here's kind of what it looks like, here's the things that we're dealing with, and here's how the effects are. Now, my model can slice and dice it any way that you'd like. So my thought here is that you can digest this a bit more. If you have any more questions, please give a call, and then you can kind of hone in on what you want to accomplish, and we'll help you as we can to get you where you need to be. Okay? A couple other quick slides. Again, if we do scenario one, you see what's on your page here on your handout, that you've got the sevens going across, and then, you know, scenario two, that's what the 3,000 gallon bill with 2,000 gallons included in minimum charge, that bill goes from 48.42 to 64.66 by making that deal. Okay? And again, that wouldn't apply to every single residential customer, right? Because if you're 2,000 or less, it doesn't change at all. So that's just what occurs to that little sliver of users that are in that category. Okay? So again, we talked a little bit about this. Don't need to go through this in any detail at all, but again, we want to manage the healthier fund. We want to avoid deferrals. We know what happens when we kick the can down the road. We've got a whole bunch of this stuff that needs to be addressed, and should have been addressed a couple of generations ago, but didn't. And now we're the ones that are managing this and moving forward with it. Need to determine, you know, cash availability, debt strategies, all those sorts of things. I put in a slide here about the town's regional presence and longevity. I'm sure you'll be here a long time, and your presence is certainly important to you, and, you know, a healthy and viable enterprise fund helps support everything else that goes on. You can't get water in the pipes and sewer away from the buildings. There's a whole lot more bigger problem than you're gonna have, and it will not be a good situation. And again, overall viability, the sustainability of your utility is certainly depending on how we make decisions from this day forward. A couple of metrics that I talked about. Over on the right-hand side is the benchmark. Operating ratio 1 or greater, that's revenue divided by expenses. So if it's 1 or greater, it means you have more money that you're bringing in than not. So you'll see in 2024, you were slightly below, you spent a little more than what you had. And in the model, we're projecting for 2025, it's a little above 1 and continuing. Talked a little earlier about the day's working capital, which is your available cash, your fund balance. Right now, you're at about 170 days. Okay, it's a good position to be in. Your debt service coverage ratio, that is a measurement of how much capacity you have in your finances to incur more debt comfortably. Okay, the debt service coverage ratio target is 1.2. You're at 6.7. Okay, so you can comfortably acquire debt and have, according to your current and projected finances, your revenue stream. You're looking at that, you're very comfortable in your ability and your capacity to incur more debt if necessary. And the last one is kind of a repeat of that, sufficiency of revenue above debt, and that's your ability to pay for existing debt service. And as long as that number is below 25%, you should be able to make your debt service payments pretty easily, which you can. Comparison with other utilities in the neighborhood, Marshall, Weaverville, Mars Hill, and Spruce Pine. The dash line going over there on the right-hand side is the median value. UNC, University of North Carolina, they have a rates dashboard for all municipal utilities in the state, water and sewer. And the median value for a 3,000 gallon bill that's listed there, 60 some odd dollars, is the median value. That's the midpoint. There's an equal number below that value and an equal number above that of the nearly 400 utilities in the state. And you can see that you're comfortably below that. That's your current rate on a 3,000 gallon bill. And that's it.
All right.
Tons of information.
Anybody have any questions for Dale or Mike, either one?
I just had a quick question about the size of the meter that you were speaking of. Like, would you speak of that, is that like a commercial building or apartment building or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's bigger,
Okay.
bigger use requires bigger meter. Bigger meter is more money to maintain and more water you have to supply to feed that use behind that meter.
Okay.
So there's more of your capacity invested in that meter size that's larger as opposed to.
Dale, thank you very much. That's a lot of information.
It is.
And we appreciate it a whole lot from both you and Mike, as always. You guys are very good to us, and we'll take all this into consideration as we move forward.
All right. Thank you very much.
I think you just need a motion to approve the capital improvement and the asset management plan.
I make that motion.
Second. All in favor, Randy?
Huh.
Motion carries. Thank you, guys. Thanks a lot. Chad.
Chad.
Sorry. Have a safe trip, guys. Thank you. All right. We'll move on to item number 5B, East Main Sidewalk Feasibility Study by Mr. Todd. I won't pronounce your last name. I was close to where I was going. Thank you, Todd.
Okay, well, good evening. Tom McCullough from AECom, and I'm here to talk about a project we've worked on with the town for the past 6-8 months since last summer. It's a feasibility study for sidewalks on East Main Street. And so a little background on the project. The town received a grant from NCDOT, the Integrated Mobility Division, or IMD, to study the feasibility of sidewalks along Main Street from existing sidewalk at Longview Road to Depot Street. The study includes high-level engineering concepts and also high-level cost estimates. And the purpose of the study, or by completing the study, it allows the town to be more competitive for grants to for the next steps in getting the project constructed. So our project partners are on the right there, the town, obviously, also the COG and DOT. So next slide, please. So the project's been around for a long time. Proposed project, and it was originally proposed in the pedestrian plan in 2006, and then it was identified in several subsequent plans, including most recently in the bicycle and pedestrian plan that the town completed last year. Next slide. So a little bit about the project itself. We were led by a steering committee, a local steering committee, like I said, the project is to extend the existing sidewalks from Longview Road to Depot Street, and to connect to existing sidewalk on Pensacola Road. That would then allow, connection to businesses on 19. The project length is just over a half a mile, and the design standards that we use are 5 foot with a 3 foot vegetated buffer between the sidewalk and the road. And then at several locations, there's pedestrian activated rapid flashing beacons, which is a long expression, but it's basically what you see on the right side, where a pedestrian can push a button and it flashes to get cars to stop to allow them to cross. So the steering committee identified 2 alternatives. The main difference between the 2 alternatives is the location of the sidewalk. Alternative 1 would have it on the south side. Alternative 2 would have it on the north side. Some of the challenges that we had were the presence of a 48-inch cement culvert just east of Meadow Road that drains to the south side. You're probably familiar with this culvert. And it's real close to the road, which means that we, extending the culvert would be cost prohibitive for this project. So we had to essentially put the sidewalk on the north side through there. But there's also topology issues on the north side, especially just east of Longview Drive. Once we developed the 2 alternatives, the steering committee and also some of the local business owners who attended our second meeting drove the selection of the preferred alternative. So next slide. And this is the preferred alternative. It's alternative 2, and I acknowledge that this is very difficult to see at this scale. So let's go on an imaginary walk, starting from the east side. We would pick up our project on the north side of East Main Street at Longview Road, where existing sidewalks are, and we would immediately cross to the south side to avoid some of those topology issues that I just mentioned. And then we would continue east to Pensacola Road, and then so we would cross Pensacola Road, or you can go right and go down to 19. And on the other side of Pensacola Road, you would cross to the north. There's an existing crosswalk there. This would have the pedestrian activated beacons. So you would cross to the north and then continue east, and there would be another crossing of East Main Street at Little Smoky. So if you wanted to go across the street and get to eat or something, you could. And then if not, you can continue down to Depot Street. And I'll just add that there's another pedestrian activated signal approximately at the prescription pad. The steering committee wanted to add that so that residents in the apartment complex up Depot Street could easily cross.
Cowley,
Yeah.
coming out of Cowley.
Across to get to prescription pad or to the laundromat. Next slide, please. So a little information about the actual design. there is, it's expected to be completed within the NCDOT right-of-way, but there are a couple easements that would be needed at the Charity House Mission and also at the Yancey County parcel, because there's some terrain issues there that would require a substantial cut. So there's the costs. The total cost is, I think it's $1.26 million. That's what's associated with this alternative. And then just another, just a little bit more information about what's included in the plan. There's an implementation section that kind of gives the town some next steps. And then we also identified some potential funding sources, and you can see a list of those there. There is a lot of money out there right now for this type of project because of the Infrastructure Act that was passed a couple of years ago. So it's a good time to be doing this right now. Next slide. And that's it. That's my presentation. I'm here to take questions if you guys have any or need more information.
Have any questions for Todd?
Just want to say Todd and the rest of the team at ACOM were great to work with. Appreciate,
Enjoyed this project.
appreciate all the hard work you guys put in for this. And I have already talked with High Country. I think the next round of RAISE grants is January of 2025. So we're on their list to look at writing one of those.
And having this done, put you guys in a good position for that kind of next step.
Very good presentation, Todd. Thank you a lot.
Okay, thank you.
You're free,
Safe
free to
travels.
stay for the remainder of the meeting if you'd like. If you want to be excused, feel free.
I know.
Thank you.
A little programming update here. We have, our Board of Adjustment meeting is supposed to take place at 7:30. The only item on that is just to approve the minutes from the last meeting. We could recess here, enter that meeting. It would take 2 minutes to approve those minutes, and then adjourn that meeting and come back into this meeting, if that's okay. Because next up is all the, staff reports, which shouldn't take too long.
Jeff.
Oh, and Jeff,
Jeff.
Sorry, Jeff.
He's in.
Sorry,
Well,
I forgot.
It won't take us. Just
I
a
meant
second.
after Jeff does his, that's what I meant.
No, it wasn't, because you didn't know he's here.
I didn't know he was here, I just forgot. Got
fine.
distracted. I don't care, let Jeff come and do his, because I don't think his will take very long, will it, Jeff?
Not now.
If you let him go after Durbin, it might be quicker.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
It's gonna be very, very brief.
Thank you, Jeff, for
Well,
waiting this out.
Thanks for letting me come and present this to you. Each of you, or most of you, have a binder up there on your table that you're welcome to breeze through when you are really needing to fall asleep. Good reading at bedtime. All the stuff that's, the other presenters that have been up here is a perfect example of why you need this plan. You got a lot of stuff on your plate. You got a lot of big numbers rolling around inside your head, and having this plan takes a lot of stuff off your plate. A lot of things you don't have to think about. And this is nothing different than anything that we've had in the past. This is just an updated, refreshed plan. The last time it was updated, I think, was in January of 2017. So we got, there was some money available through the High Country Council of Governments. We took them up on that to do a revised emergency operations plan. It really changes nothing as far as town of Burnsville is concerned. Everything remains in place. This is just a new plan. That's really all there is to it. But from an emergency management standpoint, just like this emergency operation plan is through Yancey County, but it is for the town of Burnsville. It's the same thing with me as emergency management coordinator. I probably see Niles Howard more than I do my own kids. during the week sometimes. Anything that you all need from me, you know that you've got it. I know that Shane knows that, I know that Niall knows that, I know that Brian knows that. Any way that I can help, and the great thing about it is, I know it's a reciprocal relationship. If I need some help from them, I know that I'm going to get it. And it's a good thing about being in a small town. You know, everybody has to help everybody else out, because anything that affects Burnsville affects all of Yancey County. Anything that affects Yancey County affects Burnsville. But I just wanted you guys to have this in your hands. It will be officially presented to the county commissioners for their signatures on Monday night. So if you're breezing through there, you'll see that there's specific responsibilities listed in there for the mayor, for the fire chief, public works, chief of police. If you have questions about that stuff, just send me notes. If we need to make quick updates of stuff, we can before the county commissioners sign off on it. And then we'll go down the list. Once they sign off, I'll send it back over to Heather and she can have you sign off on it. But if you have any questions on it, everybody in Yancey County seems to have my phone number. Feel free to call me anytime. Speaking of phone numbers, for the few people that are here, those of you, how many people get emergency alerts from Yancey Alerts? Brian, don't roll your eyes. Yeah, that's good, because I asked that same question in county commissioners meeting a few weeks ago, and maybe
I raised my hand, Jeff.
you're the one that counts, Katie. You are the one that counts, I'm so glad. But a lot of people didn't even know that it was available. Please help us get that out. If you can put it, I don't know if I need to send this to Chad. We have this link on our county website, because what folks don't understand, 80% of 911 calls come in from cellular phones. Most people don't have landlines anymore. If you don't have a landline, you're not going to get the alert from Yancey County. You have to go in and register your cell phone for it, and a lot of people don't know that. I think we only have like 6,000 people registered, and you know there's a lot more cell phones than that in Yancey County. So Chad, I'll send that link to you if you can get it on there. But if no one has any questions for me, my stomach's going to growl just any second now, and I'll be out of your way.
Appreciate that.
And maybe Katie could do a PSA on it.
I already put it in the paper. The last time
We
we talked
probably,
about
you
it.
know, honestly, we probably need to do that like maybe once a month or something.
Paper, radio, Facebook.
Facebook is.
Jeff, I would ask that you might back up and reiterate, because we all do have a good relationship with you, but she did forget you were back there, so that might be the one
I've known
person.
Heather for a long
I
time.
understand that, I understand that, but
Not unusual.
no, thank you for what you did.
That's not true.
Thank you, Jeff, for all you do. All right, so we're gonna briefly recess, is that correct?
Do we have to come back?
Huh?
Do we have to come back?
No, not unless you
You
just.
write the paper.
It's your paper.
You need a motion to
Yeah, do I have a
recess?
Just have a motion to recess.
I make a motion to recess.
I second it.
Okay.
Y'all don't have to leave, do you?
No.
No,
they don't.
nobody
Y'all
has
don't
to
have
leave.
It's not closed session. It's not? Oh, okay.
See you later.
Ron said he's getting some of them songs approved.
Oh, okay.
I'm about hungry.
I actually don't feel quite as bad, and I didn't pay attention to them when I thought.
Y'all, listen, you don't have any, y'all heard that, y'all know how many conversations we've had. Listen.
You're ready now.
There you go. We'll save you a trip.
Is it cash?
Yeah.
Mike said,
So there's a limit
because he had kidded me, he said, I'm just gonna do an interpreting thing.
by law or something?
Okay.
I'm gonna call to order the
Board of
Burnsville Board of
Adjustment.
50 for me,
Adjustments
50
for
for
regular
Judy.
meeting Thursday, April 14th, 2024. Everybody had an opportunity to look over this large agenda.
I make a motion to adopt the agenda.
You second, and Randy did too, I heard him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've never had to do this before.
everyone had an opportunity to look over the minutes from the BOA regular meeting.
Who knew there were all
January
these little regulations?
I make a motion to.
They don't care if
Adopt
it's
or
a
approve,
check, that's
whatever.
fine. Yeah, it's cash.
Second it.
If it's okay with you, then that's how you.
They just having a conversation, we're in the middle of a meeting, sir.
So Randy adopted too.
It's a lot more casual.
What are they doing?
Nothing, we're done.
I make a
Motion
motion
to-
to adjourn.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Does anybody need to pee before we
We
go
will,
back?
we will use the
Have a
restroom. real quick if we need
comfort
to.
break.
Does that have vodka in it? Cause I want some.
I told, I said Brussels to the vodka, he's a lightweight, cause I,
Think
he
it's
said.
just me, okay?
I told
And I
I
get
told
these.
Taylor, I said, it's just keywords, I can just try to pick out keywords, cause it's just like.
But they don't,
He said-
later though, the
No,
meeting.
he sent me out, and then he said, there might be some questions, and I was like, there are no questions. And then you asked questions, I said, I was wrong, you said you should have put some money on DraftKings. I said, do they pay out tequila? He said, I wish.
About the time I
And then he
that
said,
text, it
Mike
had
said-
no more than went, Heather take text.
But wait, there's more.
All over it, I got tickled because I just sent you that text. I'm concerned about him there. Where do we have water at like that?
Right there.
It's right around the
And I
hall.
said, I said, the believe
You
me.
can take this home and read it.
We've had an hour-long meeting on water.
Oh,
Right.
Appreciate your,
That's why I don't, I mean, I'm not kidding.
He said
wish
I
had to
should.
get
Make a motion.
Alright, now it's up to Heather to get us through this.
I have no project updates. There's nothing has changed. Yeah, I'm serious. Nothing has changed. Everything's just going. Other than the West Interceptor contracts did get signed this week, and hopefully the pre-con will be scheduled soon. And then tax report, you guys should have it. It went in the paper, and so Jackie and I are gonna sit down at some point and decide who we're gonna gun for.
Is that all you got?
That's all I got.
Now I got pee.
Well, you've already been in the
I
bathroom.
suggest not going to these and sitting on the toilet.
I don't have to see it, Katie.
Don't put that in a minute.
I know he's been to the bathroom. Well, I haven't.
Alright.
This meeting's deteriorated.
This thing is deteriorated, hasn't it?
Alright, Mr. Fox.
Thank you,
We'll move
sir.
on to you.
Got some CDGBI compliance plans that are necessary for our West Main Interceptor Improvements Project. They need to be updated. We've got a citizen participation plan or procurement policy and plan. Need to get those approved and sent to Michelle and the DEQ.
Have a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And the other thing is the vacancy on the ABC board this time of year. We always have a term in, and this time Jamie, our chair, his term is ended, and he has expressed a willingness to serve again if you all see fit. We also have one other application, which was Brian Franklin, who worked there previously.
I'll make a motion to, reason for Jamie.
I second.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Is that McMahon?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
And that is all I have.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
Good Lord, look at Shane. Oh, never mind. I was fixing to say Shane's got a buck here.
No, just one other
Okay.
thing there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only thing I've got is the mowing contract. We received the bids in, and Mount Top was the lowest bidder at the time, and there's a possibility of it saving approximately roughly $3,000 a year, because our previous contractor needed 8 months. They will do it, just whatever, as far as, it may be 7 months, so there's a possibility.
I mean, there's no way that 8 months would be too much. I mean, there's no way that.
Well, it depends on your weather.
If it's dry.
You're basically into April.
Chances are 7 months is, you might even get by with 6.
Right.
Depending on what the weather is like. So, there's opportunity that saves you even more than around $3,000.
And that's still twice a month.
Twice a
correct?
month, yes, that is correct. If you all are still willing.
How many bids did you receive on that, Shane?
I've
3.
got 2, really.
Do you have a motion to approve, or any questions for Shane on that? Everybody knows, I guess, who that is.
Yeah, I read it, so I make a motion to approve it.
Have a second.
Authorize Shane or myself, one to sign it, the contract.
Which one wants to?
Who wants to sign it?
This is me, I'll sign it.
Authorize Heather to sign.
Make that motion.
All in favor? Randy, you good with it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Shane. Miss Leslie?
I really don't think I have anything. I sent out the budget versus actual and the overtime report.
We need to get McGill to come more often.
Golly.
We knew it was gonna be.
We're having a budget meeting 22nd at 10 o'clock.
7,
And we're
isn't it?
starting, huh?
7 o'clock?
Yeah.
AM.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can hold it, you'll be here all by yourself. But we're starting with Brian's department tomorrow and next week.
Yeah.
Thank you, Leslie.
You're welcome.
Chief Howe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Didn't have any fires this month either, did we?
I wish. You do have the activity report for the month, passed out to you, and there were a total of 30 calls for the month, bringing us to 93 for the year, through the end of March, and still seem to be
3% increase now. That's a problem.
working through fire alarms mostly this past month. Just to update you on some things going on, I've been working with some partnership with the RC&D and the Forest Service, Emergency Management, and several people, both North Carolina and the U.S. Forest Service folks on the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And it's something that's updated every year, and basically just to give you a little idea what it is, we identify certain areas of the community which are at higher risk for wildfire causing problems. We don't think of this being an urban interface, but we are basically an urban interface. We run into a lot of forest areas, so we've identified those areas where wildfire could come in and cause problems for people's homes, and put those on a huge map. It's a big project, big undertaking. It's taking place in all the fire districts in the county, and there'll be a county map with those areas identified, and also roads that are one way in, one way out, and those kind of things. So it's a good thing, and it also has listed in it for those particular identified communities things they can do to mitigate their own fire hazards, like cleaning around their houses, don't fall with the leaves, clearing their roofs, and their construction materials, their road widths, pull-offs, all sorts of things that they can do. So out of it will come some learning opportunities for the community, I hope so. That
So it's the
will-
Forest Service working with all districts, even the ones that don't join any private or,
RC&D is basically heading up the
Public
project, and the Forest Service has gotten involved because their lands are the ones that impact us, so.
right.
They got all kinds of partnerships going on. They actually do some community training with those individuals in these communities. So everybody will be involved. There's a whole bunch of partnerships involved in this, and I told the lady today, we met with her this morning, Jeff and I did, the amount of data that she has collected to put on these maps is unreal. Places, conservative properties in the county, the state park, the residences are located, drawn on the map, on the roads they're on, and just a whole multitude of information, which will be great and useful for everybody. Even the town may be able to use some of the information from that report, so it's a good thing. And I appreciate you approving of the truck. We did get it here.
Sweet.
And
Yeah, I got to see it when it didn't take him long to go get it. It was back that same day, and it was a fine looking.
Well, when he left, he
truck.
said, "Can I have a check now?"
Yeah. Well, he said it was the first come, first served, so.
So, I didn't get it here, and we're working on getting it in service. Gotta get certain equipment on it that the state wants approved before you put it in service, but it's getting close.
Did you have a lot of the stuff as far as?
I had quite a bit. Now, I'm having to buy some stuff. I had mostly enough hose to go on it and most of the nozzles to go on it, but the other equipment, put radios in it and some things like that because they took their radios, of course. So that's gonna take a little time to get that in there.
It was definitely a good buy because it was a good looking truck for the mileage. You're not gonna find that probably ever again, so.
Well, fortunately, the guys who do our service on our apparatus had done the service on this truck up until last year.
So they knew
So
it.
when I called him to talk to him about it, he said, "I know the truck." He says it's a good truck, so he's gonna come over and work on the throttle for the pump. It's a little stiff and a little corroded, so he's gonna put a new throttle on it for me, but it's, I felt better about it after talking to him, but.
Good deal. Thank you, Chief Hale. Nice picture, by the way. That was nice. Oh, my God.
Yeah, you ain't done, you ain't done yet.
Yeah.
My turn.
Yeah.
The gnomes are cute.
Yeah. You finished.
He had a
No.
hard time drawing
Is
those.
that all
He
you had?
did.
Yes,
He
thank you.
did.
He did.
Chief Buchanan.
Thank you, sir. You have my activity
See him
load.
in fields and Bennett.
Enough said.
Yeah.
The only extra item I have is, we are losing an officer. Randall Shuford is retiring, at the end of the month. He has been with the town now for 20 years and 3 months, according to this. He'll have his 30 years total of law enforcement. He came to us from the Yancey County Sheriff's Office. And, as part of that, it's usually customary, and there is a state statute that Heather's prepared a resolution for, where we can turn over his service weapon and his badge. And I would ask the board to
Make the motion.
Now second.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you, appreciate that. We are gonna have, I think, a little small, like drop-in, drop-out thing, kind of thing for him. At some point, we haven't nailed down the exact date and time on that. I'm not a terrific planner, but people.
We're gonna help you.
People are gonna
I
help.
mean, if you take a little time off your drawing.
You might learn some, he's got decorations down. He's the decoration guy.
And zoning code enforcement wise, we do have a planning board meeting Tuesday. We have 3 things on the agenda, one of which will be the changes to the Board of Adjustment and 2 other development projects that they'll be making recommendations toward as far as developments coming in. That's really all I have.
Thank you, Chief. All right, Corbin, nobody was in the town center for the last month, right?
Not a single person.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
We have 25 events this month, 23 in May, Burnsville Roach Sale coming up on April 18th and 19th. That's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Good job.
Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you as always, Corbin. All right, any council members have anything they'd like?
I'd like to talk about the trees.
Adjourn.
You for or against?
I'm for going out there and cut them down, because Lucy said cut them down.
You brought Chandler the wood.
Make sure the minutes reflect that.
Chandler the
Have anything from the advisory boards or nonprofits? High Country's not here, Bill's not here.
Did we find out from Bill, is he lying?
He's live.
Yeah. He forgot.
Uh-oh.
So we
Dementia
have, so
set in,
we
so-
leave open session? to go in.
Yeah, if you're gonna do these.
We're here, we might as
Ah,
well do it.
all right.
If it's okay with everybody, while we're here. So, that, make a motion to go in.
I
closed
did,
session.
I just made it.